Welcome to the JISS podcast. I'm extremely pleased to have with me this evening Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak. He is a Turkey expert at the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies at Tel Aviv University and at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He's received his PhD from Tel Aviv University School of History, and he's a lecturer there, as well at the Shalem Academic College. And he's also the editor of Turkeyscope, Insights on Turkish affairs. And in fact, I consider him to be the top expert on Turkey in the state of Israel. This is my view. Hi, how are you this evening?
Thank you very much for having me and for your kind words. I'm not taking it for granted. Thank you.
My pleasure, and that's sincerely what I think. So let's cut straight to the chase. Everybody's talking about Iran, the Shiite axis, and we are deliberately going to be talking about something else this evening. We're recording on February 24th, and we have a huge military buildup here in the region by the American armed forces. So everybody's looking at Iran. And so the attention has been sort of taken away from Turkey. But Turkey is the country that seems to be thinking in terms of the longest term strategy, in terms of building a new Sunni Islamist bloc. And it seems to be navigating all of the regional changes in ways that seem to benefit the vision of President Erdogan. So the first question I want to ask you, Chai, is how does Turkey view the crisis between the United States and Iran? What do they want to get out of it? How would they want to see this end? What's the Turkish endgame going forward in your view?
Okay. First of all, once again, allow me to thank you for having me on this distinguished platform. And regarding your question, well, as we can understand also from the statements of the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, Turkey is very, upset about the what is going on in Iran. They want to see the continuation of the Ayatollah regime. Well, it's not because that they are fond of the Ayatollahs or the Islamic Revolution, but they don't want to cope with another new challenge which is unknown to them. They are very much disturbed from the probability that Iran might disintegrate, and with this disintegration, we may see, of course, a kind of a Kurdish autonomy slash a Kurdish independence that in the past we have seen in Iran. The first ever independent Kurdish republic was the Republic of Mahabad, which is also known as Kurdistan. It was on the Roj Helat region. It was in the eastern Kurdistan in the Kurdish terminology. So they absolutely do not want to see any kind of disintegration of Iran. This is the first issue. Second issue, obviously, in case of a full-scale war between the United States and Iran, we may definitely will see a refugee influx. And therefore, Turkey, we all know that, suffered from refugee influx during the Syrian civil war. Almost 4 million people, according to official numbers, came to Turkey and had this status of being a refugee. Of course, this created devastating results for
Right.
the Turkish society, the unemployment rates, xenophobia, etc. Therefore, for instance, according to some news outlets, Turkey nowadays even planning to have an extraterritorial military operation within the Iranian territories in case of a regime fall. Okay, so that they would establish there a buffer zone similar to that they established during the 1990s in northern Iraq. Then Turkey organized a buffer zone, formed a buffer zone in northern Iraq, and they provided humanitarian aid to the Kurdish civilians who were running from Saddam Hussein's brutality. So
Right. And they've
in
got
this
one
such
in
a
Syria
case,
now, right?
yeah, what did you say?
And they've got one in Syria as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Going,
and the Turkish occupation in Syria is something else. It was launched against ISIS, and then they focused their efforts against the PYD-YPG, against the Kurds, basically in Syria, because from Turkish eyes, this PYD-YPG is a continuation of the PKK, which is considered as a terrorist organization by Turkey. So, long story short, and in additional thing regarding Iran, um, in addition to all these that I already mentioned, the decision makers in Ankara are also concerned that if there will be such a new government in Iran, but the new Iranian regime, God willing, which will replace the current Ayatollah regime, will be considered as a friend of the state of Israel. So even if Israel still does not label Turkey as a hostile state and really is not interested in engaging in any kind of hostilities with Turkey, unfortunately, we see that the Turkish side already labeled Israel as the number one national security threat, and they believe that such a new friendly pro-Israel government in Iran may also threaten the Turkish national interests. And needless to say, Turkey, in its Middle East policy, they don't want to see any kind of military interventions that are orchestrated by the United States. How do we see it? How do we understand it? Well, the Turks launched a new initiative called the Neighbors of Syria initiative. When you are looking at the most important objectives of that particular initiative, you will definitely going to see that one of the most important objectives is for not allowing the external powers to conduct military interventions in the Middle East. Let's say if we have an ISIS problem and the United States would like to conduct a military strike against ISIS, so this initiative will going to persuade the American decision makers so that the Neighbors of Syria initiative slash the Middle Eastern states are going to solve this problem within the regional boundaries without allowing the United States to conduct such an intervention. So
wow.
I'm I'm
Hmm.
drawing this line from Syria, from that particular organization's spirit. Okay, I'm reading between the lines. So I'm
Hmm.
taking that. I'm taking that idea, the most important goal, and I'm copying it and pasting it to the Iranian arena, and
Right.
then I can draw the conclusion that Turkey also does not want to see any kind of American military intervention also in Iran. Long story short, Turkey is seeing this friction uh, in a way, against its own interests. And after the decisive Israeli victory against Iran, well, Turkey would like to see a weakened Iran, which will keep Israel busy, which will keep the Western powers busy, so that its own problems at home, for instance, the erosion of the
Hmm.
Turkish democracy, the fact that the mayor of Istanbul still in the jail, for instance. So all of the Western world will be still busy with Iran. Israel would allocate all of its resources to cope with the Iranian threat, and then in the meantime, Turkey can expand its influence at the expense of the Israeli-Iranian friction.
Right. So, if I understand correctly, it's not that Turkey wants a strong Iran at all. What they want is a weak thorn in the side of Israel, to keep Israel bleeding, to keep the West and the Americans busy. And this distraction, with two of its, I guess you could call it adversaries, even if they don't say so officially, um, is designed to enable them to do what? Chai? What do they want to do with this distraction? What's their regional ambition?
The original ambition is to Turkey to make Turkey great again, as the Americans,
Yeah.
are using this term, make America great again. So also in the Turkish case, well, even if they did not market this foreign policy approach in such a attractive slogan as the American people do, right?
Hmm.
But we also heard a very important term which is called neo-Ottomanism.
Yep.
Well, when you are looking at the Turkish social media and, of course, the institutionalized media, even if they would like to reject this very existence of neo-Ottomanism, by the way, they are rejecting it because in the Arab Middle East, the Arab
Hmm.
nationalism emerged as a reaction against Ottomans. And
Right.
in order to not to lose the Arab street, so they tend not to
Mm.
use this term called neo-Ottomanism. But when you are analyzing these speeches, the the spirit and let me say the spirit of the zeitgeist, like the
Yep.
spirit of the time. And when you're watching the Turkish movies, the soft power engines themes, you are seeing a very visible neo-Ottoman element. So
Right.
for the good of our audience, I would like to define what is neo-Ottomanism. Neo-Ottomanism is the Turkish ambition, is the Turkish desire to revive the Turkish influence in the ex-territories of the Ottoman Empire. So when we are talking about the Ottoman Empire, obviously we are speaking about the Middle East, North Africa, some parts of Caucasia, the Black Sea Basin, and of course Balkans, right? So it's a kind of a clower, okay, a
Yep.
clower that we are
Yep.
seeing that Turkey is very active even today in Europe. They are trying to expand their influence from Caucasia to Central Asia and to the south to the Middle East, and since they are expanding their influence to Africa as well. So therefore, we definitely see a very, proactive Turkish foreign policy that they want to make Turkey relevant for every kind of sphere. Also in Russian-Ukrainian, conflict.
Yep.
Also in Eastern Mediterranean. Also, let's say, in Somalia or in Qatar or in Gaza Strip, in Syria, wherever we are looking, we are seeing the Turkish presence there. So this is the name of the game. If something is going on in the Middle East and in the Turkish hinterland, in this historical Turkish hinterland, so you should not expect Ankara to remain silent. They
Hmm.
they are doing everything possible in order to present in the table and to influence. So you asked me, what is the grand plan? The grand plan is to recrown
Yep.
Turkey as the Ottoman Empire once was perceived. But of course, I'm not talking about Ottoman Empire of the 19th century, but rather
Right.
when Ottoman Empire was perceived as a superpower, like in the days of Suleiman the Magnificent.
Right. This is several hundred years ago,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
15th,
definitely.
16th century. What's the relationship between Islamism and Ottomanism? Because I've been having quite a few discussions about Turkey, the neo-Ottoman ambitions, and some people will say, well, but look at what's happening inside Turkey. Even though Erdogan is obviously jailing his opponents and definitely, not acting in any way that can be described democratic. some people would say, but it's not becoming Islamist by law. You're not saying Sharia law. The secular people can still live as secular people. And in that respect, it's not going down the path of, say, Iran. So,
Mhm.
what's the relationship between Islamism and the neo-Ottoman ambitions? And would you consider Turkey to be an Islamist power? Are they a central part of the Muslim Brotherhood vision? How should we read them in terms of
Okay.
political
That's a
Islam,
that,
jihadism?
yeah, that's a really good question. I can tell you that even Erdogan himself does not want to see Turkey to turn into an Islamic Sharia. He is very much interested in to use religion as a tool to facilitate his rule. Okay, this is very important. And I would like to make a very important reference from history. You mentioned Iran and the clergy class of the Shiite Islam. So when we are seeing Iran, this is the Iranian case. But when I'm looking at the Ottoman history, well, in the Ottoman history, I see the strong Sultan, and below that strong Sultan, I see a very important figure called Sheikhul Islam. The Sheikhul Islam was the senior religious official
Mhm.
who had to find necessary Quranic verses or Sunnah practices in order to legitimize the decisions that were taken by the Sultan. Okay, if you
Okay,
like to sanctify the state.
right,
So what we are seeing here in this case is religion is used to legitimize the secular decisions that were taken by a secular body called Sultan, even if the Sultan himself used the title of the Caliph and the guardian of Mecca and
right.
Medina,
Because they
etc.
did consider
But
themselves a caliphate,
yeah,
right?
but long story short, Sultan was not a religious cleric. Okay, Sultan used religion to legitimize his own power.
I
So in
see.
case of today's Turkey, we are seeing that Erdogan is using the Turkish Directorate of Religious Affairs, which is with its popular name in Turkish, Diyanet, with a huge budget. He is
Hmm.
using this instrument as a very important tool also to launch a religionization of the Turkish society. Okay, but also to use it as a global network with its global network of mosques to have Turkey's influence abroad. Okay, this is again very crucial. And
Right.
we are seeing the influence of this body, especially in Central Europe, in Germany, in Austria, in France, in Belgium, etc. Okay, so this is again very crucial. And you also mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood dimension. Well,
Yeah.
during the 1960s, 1970s in Turkey, there was a publishing house called the Hilal. Hilal means the crescent. This
Hmm.
particular publishing house was located at the province called Malatya. That's why all of the books that were printed by this print house is also known as the Malatya School. So, what was printed in this Hilal publication house? The very important works of Hassan el-Banna, Said Qutb, or if we are
These
talking
are key
about
members of the
the
Muslim Brotherhood, just for the audience. Hassan Banna, the
yes,
founder, the Egyptian founder, and Said Qutb in the 1960s, who really, took these ideas to the next level and considered even secular Arab nationalist countries to be basically infidels and the first, enemies that the Islamists have to topple. But please continue.
indeed, indeed, and even if we have to refer to Said Qutb's book called The Milestones,
Yeah.
there he said that if the state is not governed according to the ideas and laws of Islam, that state should be labeled as an infidel state. So
Right.
you do not have to obey to that state, etc., etc. So the
Right.
secular Turkey, they outlawed, for instance, that particular book of Said Qutb, but Erdogan and his comrades and that Islamist school, basically, they grew up with these books that were translated in the Turkish language.
Hmm.
Therefore, of course, these books influenced the Turkish intellectuals, let me say, like Necip Fazıl Kısakürek, who is known with his influence over Erdogan and all Islamists in Turkey. Well, they got this Ottoman glory and they got this pan-Islamism and they conducted a synthesis with these ideas, and obviously, you may not blame them if this is their worldview. Well, they wanted to upgrade this worldview once they also came to power, right?
Right.
They wanted to implement this worldview in order to, as we say in Hebrew, tikkun olam, right?
Yeah. Repairing the world.
Yeah, repairing the world, repairing the Muslim world. So
Yep.
that's why today's Turkey is using religion as a very important glue, like a cement to unite the Islamic countries or the Islamic Ummah, or let me say the Sunni Muslim people, right?
Right.
But still, we are seeing that Turkey is very ambitious. And right after the Israeli victory against Iran, they also mentioned, Erdogan himself mentioned that the destiny of Istanbul and Ankara cannot be separated from Tehran. So even if there are sectarian, differences between the Iranians and the Turks, we are seeing we are seeing that Turks are trying to um, show a kind of a superiority that the Iranians are need to be protected, or as we also see recently, nowadays we are seeing that there are negotiations between the United States and Iran in Oman. But
Hmm.
before Oman, I would like to remind to our audience, Turkey was almost hosting the talks
Right.
between Iran and the United States. And I believe that that was the Iranian decision, that they wanted to change the venue of these negotiations in order not to strengthen Ankara's hands so much in the Middle East. Because let us not forget, these two countries, Iran and Turkey, they are historical rivals.
Yes. Yes. That is a very, very interesting analysis, and it leads me directly to the next question, which is on the minds of many Israelis, and it is, if we assume that Iran is going to continue to decrease in power, and the Iranian Shiite axis will continue to decrease in power, is Turkey going to become the next Iran in its own way? This is something that's brought up in Israel on a regular basis. It already hosts Hamas. It already is trying to fill a vacuum in Gaza. It's creating mosques that are named after jihadists in the Gaza Strip, including one who was a founding member of Al Qaeda. And of course, in Syria, it's moving into Syria. It already controls northern Syria, as we said earlier. And of course, it views the al-Sharaa regime as a sort of a proxy that it can use to sell weapons and use it as a kind of, I guess, a proxy force. So, the big question on a lot of people's minds in Israel and abroad is, do you think that Turkey is going to become its own kind of Sunni Islamist version of Iran, or is it going to pursue a different strategy?
Okay, this is the toughest question that you asked in my opinion. And it's not easy for me to understand to answer this question. And the reason is, I was born and raised in Turkey, so I love Turkey very much, and I definitely don't want to see Turkey to
Right.
turn into a new Iran. Well, as of February 2026, we can definitely say that Turkey still is not the new Iran. The Israeli planes are still are allowed to use the Turkish airspace. Even if there are some unpleasant incidents, the Israeli citizens are still allowed to enter Turkey with their passports, vice versa. Okay, so on paper, the two countries, they did not declare any kind of hostilities against each other. And even if we are seeing a steady deterioration in the relations, we should still cherish this fact that nothing is, uh, everything is not lost. Okay, there are still some things that might be repaired, but, and this is a very important but. It doesn't mean that we have to be naive. Since October the 7th, unfortunately, we are seeing that the Turkish administration took a very important decision that they adopted not only a pro-Palestinian state that we were used to it, but they upgraded this pro-Palestinian stance with a pro-Hamas stance while legitimizing the Hamas terrorist organization. We are seeing Turkey delegitimizing the state of Israel, being a part of the South Africa's bid against the state of Israel at the ICJ in Hague. In addition to that, we are seeing that Ankara is imposing economic sanctions and it is ending this people-to-people relations by putting an end to direct flights and imposing trade sanctions against the state of Israel. Again, this is a very bold and tough decision that you are not allowing here any kind of any kind of room to rehabilitate the relationship between the two countries, to mend the fences between the two countries. This is very problematic. And we are seeing, unfortunately, this delegitimization is unfortunately on daily basis. The Turkish courts issued arrest warrants against the Israeli decision makers. Well, if they are issuing such arrest warrants, with whom they are going to normalize the relationship? So this is a
Right.
huge question.
Hmm.
Recently, the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said that Turkey has no problem with Israel, but with Israel's current policies in Gaza Strip and in the region itself because of its so-called expansionist policies. Fidan said that if Israel would change its policy in the region, then the normalization is possible. I think that's a huge lip service. It's a kind of a very clever diplomatic maneuver to persuade the Americans that Turkey is not the new Iran because in a conditional way they are still opening a door for normalization. But dear Yaakov, you're also living in Israel. Do you think that Israel is capable of changing its policy vis-a-vis Gaza Strip unless Hamas would be disarmed?
Not if it wants to stick around in the region,
Yeah, I mean, it is impossible, right? Because
of
we
course.
have experienced here a very tectonic historic event called October the 7th. And non-Israeli government, even if the current Israeli government will be replaced by a new one, even that government will not be able to change this very solid policy vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip.
100%. It's a survival defense strategy, I would call it that. Otherwise, the South would be basically, compromised
Yeah,
as an area a habitable area.
yeah,
So
definitely.
I take your point completely.
And
And
if you allow me,
sure,
apologies that I interrupted your
feel
words.
free.
Please do not forget your question. In addition to that, Israel had no choice but to take control of five different locations inside Lebanon because, unlike Turkey, unlike Russia, Israel has no strategic depth. And since Hezbollah terrorist organization is not recognizing the state of Israel and is not willing to put an end to its terrorist activities against the state of Israel. And the Lebanese state is not willing to declare its intention of normalizing and signing a peace treaty with the state of Israel. So Israel has no other choice than to control these five important locations inside the Lebanese territory. It is not, these places were not taken just to satisfy, I mean, to satisfy the Israeli nationalist feelings. It is absurd to think that Israel is willing to annex these territories. The same, all of the things that I mentioned here is also applicable for the newly captured Syrian territory of the Golan of the Hermon Mountains. Again, if the new Syrian government would be ready to recognize Israel and make a genuine peace treaty, I think there will be no problem. The army would withdraw within hours or days. So now, kindly ask you to ask me your question because I wanted to tell these just to show that
Yes,
even if Fidan is seemingly is opening a door, Israel is not capable of fulfilling Fidan's demands because it would jeopardize its security. And also, Fidan knows that. And that's why
right.
he is opening the door as if he is trying to fix the relations, trying to mend the fence.
Yes.
But his
If
real intention
Israel if
is not.
Israel commits basically some sort of suicidal defense policies, then Turkey could accept it. This is the equation that's on the table.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
do you think that they've been able to deceive President Trump? Because it seems that the Trump administration, President Trump, has got a very good relationship with Erdogan, with Turkey. He remains in NATO, and this is a huge difference between them and Iran. That access to NATO, the relationship with the United States, puts them in a completely different league in terms of their international standing, in terms of the military capabilities, that they're building, also their domestic arms industry, which is a whole side issue, but very, interesting for military analysts. Do you think that they're able to get away with some sort of deception here?
Well, they are doing their best. However, I believe despite the fact that we are not seeing any kind of a tangible action from the White House regarding this matter, that they are not pushing Turkey, that they should normalize their relationship with Israel, or they should, lower their antagonist approach vis-a-vis Israel. We are not seeing real tangible actions, but it doesn't mean that the Americans are not aware. I believe that President Trump is a very clever man, and but I mean, his style is very different from other politicians. I think he is driven with pragmatism, and he is focusing on the results. He is looking at Israel and Turkey and asking this question. Yes, there is a diplomatic friction. Yes, the language that we are hearing between Israel and Turkey is a kind of hostile, especially the language that Turks are using against the state of Israel. But bottom line, do we see a military real friction? Are we at the edge of a war? Tomorrow, are we going to speak about a real full-scale war between Israel and Turkey? And we all know that, thank God. The answer is no. And the American president is focusing only to the to this final conclusion. Since he knows that tomorrow Recep Tayyip Erdogan is not going to launch a military offensive against Israel. And I did not mention the exact opposite because, from our perspective, it is known that our government will not going to take such a step because Israel has no ambitions in Turkish territories, etc. So, yeah, so this is the core reason. So the Americans are focusing to the, on the conclusion, on the conclusion
Right.
line, and they do not see that such friction and such a war, such a confrontation may occur tomorrow, and therefore they are telling themselves maybe, okay, for domestic politics purposes, let them use all of these tools as they see okay. And yes, this is problematic, but as I mentioned, if we are not seeing tangible consequences
Yeah.
that may create tectonic changes, so let them, make these populistic statements. I
Right.
think, I mean, even if I'm doing this analysis, I'm not saying that that's a good thing because
Right.
it is a kind of a snowball. Today, this snowball is small, but within time, this hostility grows. And maybe not in this administration, but maybe in the next administration or within the coming years, maybe with the same administration, we may see an unwanted incident that may
Yes.
turn into a real conflict, which I think both sides should understand and internalize and should act like adults, that
Hmm.
this would create devastating consequences also for Turkey, but also for Israel. And
Right.
only Israel's and Turkey's enemies would profit from this kind of a friction. And therefore, realpolitik dictates these two countries should never confront.
Okay, well, let's hope that that is indeed what's going to happen, because as you say, there are certainly possibilities for, yeah, unintended conflicts and clashes that could escalate. Especially, I'm thinking about the Mediterranean Sea, but I'm also thinking about Gaza and Syria because it seems that Turkey is very interested in dominating both, and of course, in Syria, it has a real chance of doing that. But what do you think their goal is in Gaza? Is this part of the same neo-Ottoman design that you're describing? Do they want to resuscitate Hamas? Are they trying to assure the future of Hamas? What's Turkey's goal in Gaza, and how can Israel counter it without, going into any sort of dangerous territory of the kind that you warned about just now?
Well, when we are talking about the Middle East, and obviously Gaza, Israel, Syria, all of these region, we can definitely look at history once again, and we can see that the Turks governed these lands for 402 years. And therefore, they are telling to their own people and also to the world, you cannot expect us to behave like the Russians, like the outsiders who have no historical bond in this land. Unlike them, if you are going to open the archives, they can show you lots of documents that can documentate the Turkish existence and sovereignty in all of these territories, right? And therefore, relying on this history and relying on the idea of making Turkey great again, which is neo-Ottomanism, okay? So they are saying that if an agreement will be reached in the Middle East, as the historical guardians of these lands and the most important, let me say, states, one of the most important states of the Sunni Islam. Uh, so they want to be recognized and they would like to have a status, for instance, a status like Egypt has in every kind of a friction with Israel. and Hamas, for instance. In Israel, for us, it's very like something by default that we always hear that the Egyptian intelligence are interfering and they are trying to calm down the tension between Israel and the Palestinian fractions, etc. It's a known story.
Right.
So now they would like to enter into this equation, okay, in favor of Hamas, and this is the bad thing that we are seeing, okay,
Hmm.
and they are trying to become a part of this new game. And if you allow me, I would also like to provide you again a very important historical perspective,
Sure.
and then we could decode together how an ordinary Turk slash the Turkish decision maker is seeing the world from this angle.
Hmm.
If you're looking at the statements of Erdogan and the foreign minister Fidan, you will going to come across to a word which is used by two of them very frequently: guaranteeship, guarantor state. Maybe you are familiar.
Okay.
And when we are looking at this term in the Turkish history, we can definitely see that Turkey has turned into an active guarantor state in Cyprus in 1960 because of the Zurich and the London treaties and the Treaty of Guarantee. Okay,
Hmm.
for in favor of our audience, I would like to remind United Kingdom, Greece, and Turkey have turned into guarantor states of a demilitarized Republic of Cyprus. So why
Right.
am I now reminding the Cypriot example? Because in 1974, when there was a military coup in Cyprus in favor of uniting the island with Greece, Turkey, the Turkish administration of that time, they interpreted this as a violation of the guaranteeship agreement, and they relied on this guaranteeship agreement and they launched a military intervention slash
Yep.
invasion in
Yeah. Which
Cyprus.
turned into a long-term occupation with
Yeah,
settlements. Of course, nobody in the world could care less, but
indeed.
that's, yeah.
Indeed. Long story short, now when they are talking since the beginning of the war, the Turks are saying, we would like to turn into a guarantor state in favor of the Palestinians and let the Americans can do that for Israelis. It means that they are downgrading Israel to the level of Hamas or to the
Hmm.
level of Republic of Cyprus, which was created with this guaranteeship agreement under the auspices of Greece, United Kingdom, and Turkey, like the adult states and the minors.
Right.
Okay? And in case that this new agreement would be violated in the future, then with this kind of a role, Turkey is declaring now that it would have the ability to confront the state of Israel militarily in the future. So
That's
that's
very that's
how
that's
the
very disturbing.
yeah, definitely. So therefore, the Israeli decision makers began to see Turkey as a potential adversary.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
I mean, it's not from nothing. Unfortunately, we are seeing here very problematic statements and policies. Yes, today's Gaza agreement providing Turkey a kind of a status. It's not a guarantor state that Turkey really wants
Yeah.
because there is no such a clause that is allowing Turkey to conduct a military strike against Israel if Israel would violate the agreement. But still, they managed to be present on the table. And I would like to remind
Yeah.
you the famous picture in the Sharm el Sheikh summit. The
Hmm.
Qataris, the Turks, Americans, and the Egyptians were on the table. So that's a historical achievement for Turkey because in the future, if uh, another political diplomatical summit would be launched. So, from their perspective, that would be the starting point that these four states they have to be invited, like a built-in members.
Right, right. Hmm.
So, therefore, I think this is very much concerning. If we were talking about Turkey of 1990s, well, we could applaud, we could really uh, be joyful that a Muslim state, which is then, of course, considered as an ally of Israel, was taking part in this kind of a delicate issue, then we could definitely welcome Turkey's intervention. But unfortunately, today, when we are hearing Turkish President Erdogan saying that whatever we did in Nagorno-Karabakh in Libya, we can definitely do that also against Israel. So this is problematic for again for the in favor of our audience. In 2019, Turkey intervened in the Libyan civil war and provided ammunition and UAVs and everything via its ghost ships to the government of national accord to Libya. And if we are talking about a divided Libya today, it is because of Turkey's intervention in that particular war. Secondly, in Nagorno-Karabakh, similar to Israel, Turkey provided ammunition, UAVs, whatever it is necessary to Azerbaijan so that they can regain the lost territories in Nagorno-Karabakh. Long story short, when I'm looking at Erdogan's statement, well, I can draw a very important conclusion. It means that Turkey is not willing to confront Israel directly, but would definitely provide arms to those forces that may confront Israel in the future. This is the between the lines, or when I'm looking at two examples, that's what Turkey did in Nagorno-Karabakh and in Libya. So when I'm seeing these examples, well, please, many of my colleagues are telling me that, but all of these statements are given because of domestic politics purposes. Okay, maybe you want to believe to these kind of an argument, but after October the 7th, I think Israel should never allow itself to make such to draw such conclusions. Israel should not look at Turkey, yeah, like let's engage in war tomorrow or something in a belligerent manner, but Israel
Yeah.
should be alerted. Israel should open its eyes and also let Turkey know that Israel is aware of every kind of statement and action, etc. Again, we only want to preserve the current, at least the current situation with Turkey of lack of hostilities. Let us hope for a better future with Ankara. But the ball is in Turkey's court, not in Israel's court, because they are the ones who are deteriorating the relationship in a steady manner.
Yes. Yeah. They're the ones who changed the status quo. And I think it's disturbing because also, when you mentioned earlier the scenario of a unintended clash, here we're talking about very intentional escalation, even if it doesn't lead to a direct clash. The arming of adversaries, we know that they support Hamas and have done so for years. So I think that your warning is critical. I assume that Israeli decision makers are taking heed. We know that this threat was also mentioned in the Nagel report, which talked about future threats. So I totally agree that after October 7th, we have no privilege of going to sleep on any potential threat. And I guess, I have just one question left, Hi, in the time that we have left. I remember, many years ago when I was a military correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, and I joined an Israeli Navy exercise that had other countries taking part, and Turkey was, one of those countries. This is back in the good old days, I guess we could call it that. And a Turkish naval officer boarded the Israeli ship. and was, shown around and briefed. And I thought this is a fantastic relationship. And it seems like, we're now in very much darker times for all of the reasons that you have outlined so clearly. So, do you think that there is any midterm, I'm not going to say short term, but midterm hope for Turkey to go back to its role as a moderate power in the region, as a friend of Israel in the peripheral, region of the Middle East, from Israel's perspective? Do you think that the Islamists or the neo-Ottomans could ever lose their grip on power, or do you think that this is an irreversible, at least in the midterm? I'm thinking 5, 10, 15 years ahead. Turkey is going to remain on this course, and we're going to have to tread with extreme caution.
Well, I wish I could answer this question in a very optimistic manner, but I would choose the exact opposite, unfortunately. And, I will rephrase your question regarding the day after Erdogan. During Erdogan's administration, I do not foresee any kind of a change. So, in the short term, let me say, until the next elections in Turkey in 2028, if they would be held as scheduled, I think we are not going to see any kind of a breakthrough in the Israeli-Turkish relations because unfortunately the current administration poisoned the Turkish public against the state of Israel so deeply that any kind of a U-turn may backfire. And therefore, we cannot expect that normalization would occur before 2028. And if it would occur, that I really do not buy it. It should come into effect right after the next elections, in the very first days of the new term of the new government. But when I'm looking at Erdogan, he is very busy with his own legacy. And unless we are going to see a miracle in Gaza Strip of reconstruction, like or Hamas disarmament, that I really do not believe that they would disarm. And therefore, I do not believe that there will be a reconstruction of Gaza because Israel will not allow the reconstruction of Gaza unless Hamas would be disarmed. So everything is unfortunately very, connected to each other. It's like a domino.
Yeah.
Therefore, I really don't think that under Erdogan, something will change. Let's see who may replace Erdogan. Well, I don't want to go into detail, but of course we have several candidates. The most popular candidates that their names are mentioned during the last 2 or 3 months are obviously the Turkish foreign minister Hakan Fidan and Erdogan's son Bilal Erdogan. Two of them are very anti-Israel figures. So I again do not foresee any kind of change. And when I'm looking at the Turkish history, um, after Atatürk's death, for instance, who were the most radical secularist politicians? Not Atatürk. The ones came after Atatürk to prove themselves to Atatürk and the Turkish public that they are the ones who are going through the path of Atatürk. So I believe that after Erdogan, the ones who would replace Erdogan, they would be even tougher against Israel to prove the public that they are going from Erdogan's path. And when I'm speaking about the Turkish opposition, well, they see that mending fences with Israel would be very hard because of this very comprehensive delegitimization campaign against the state of Israel. It would not be
Right.
easy to pose to camps with Israeli leaders, especially with the current administration in Israel. Uh, it would be
It's
almost
not
a kind of a
it's not
mission
an
impossible
optimistic.
because
Yeah.
their political situation would be very fragile, that they would do everything possible to consolidate their power, and a kind of a normalization with Israel would most likely damage their reputation in the eyes
Right.
of the Turkish public, and it would decrease their public approval. So let's imagine that in case of a government change in Turkey, that I do not foresee such a thing because of the current circumstances, the most
Yeah,
important candidate is in jail, right? So the let's imagine that the Turkish opposition's first term would most likely be focused on its own survival and with
right,
chasing Erdogan people. Okay, this is a Turkish tradition that whoever is governing the country is chasing the other and is seeking to throw them into jail, right?
right,
So, in case of, if we are talking about normalization, most likely it would occur in the second term of the opposition government if they would survive.
right. I see.
So, apologies. I wish that I
It's
could
not
answer.
very logical answer, and I think it's an important answer because it will adjust our expectations going forward, Kai. So, I wish we had more time to get into this, but unfortunately, we have run out of time for this particular episode. But first of all, Kai, thank you so much for this analysis. I think it's critical. I think that this needs to be heard globally, and that's what we're going to be promoting. So, definitely, I would encourage the audience members to share this clip with everybody they know because I really think that the insights that you have offered here are critical not only for Israeli national security but also for global security as well. Dr. Chai Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, thank you so much for taking part in this episode, and hopefully we will have you back sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much for having me once again and for your professionalism. Thank you, Yaakov.
Thank you.